A homeless boy walked into the most exclusive bank in Chicago. "I just want to check my balance," he whispered. The millionaire banker burst into laughter. But when the screen lit up, his smile froze forever. But before we dive into this powerful story, make sure to subscribe to stay updated with more touching family tales. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The October wind sliced through Chicago's financial district, rattling the windows of towers that Donald Brown had only ever seen while searching for warm subway vents. At 14 years old, he understood the city's unspoken rule. There were places for people like him. Shelters after dark, soup kitchens on Thursdays, the covered alcove behind the public library, and places that existed in a different dimension entirely. Today, clutching a battered envelope discovered sewn into his dead father's military jacket, Donald was about to violate that rule. His worn sneakers, laces tied 3 times to hold them together, left faint dusty prints on the polished marble as he pushed through the brass revolving doors of Hampton and Associates. The warmth inside felt aggressive, almost accusatory, exposing the 8 months of street grime that no gas station sink could fully wash away. The lobby swallowed him whole. Vaulted ceilings that seemed designed to make humans feel small, leather furniture in shades of burgundy and cream that whispered "don't touch," the sharp perfume of fresh orchids masking any trace of the real Chicago outside. A receptionist looked up, and Donald watched her expression shift from neutral to guarded in half a second. Then he appeared, Alan Hampton himself. Brioni suit. Rolex catching the light. The kind of man whose face belonged on magazine covers, whose confidence filled rooms like oxygen. Everything Donald wasn't: clean, secure, legitimate. The collision was inevitable. Donald woke to the smell of grease and rotting produce, his cheek pressed against cardboard that had long since stopped providing any real cushioning. The alley behind Rosie's diner was his spot. Had been for 3 weeks now, ever since the guy who used to sleep there got picked up by CPD. The dumpster blocked most of the wind, and if he timed it right, the kitchen staff tossed out day-old bread around 11 at night. He was 14 years old. He woke up in alleys. The morning routine was automatic now. Fold the cardboard, tuck it behind the dumpster where the newer homeless kids wouldn't find it, check that the envelope was still safety pinned inside his jacket pocket. The McDonald's 6 blocks away opened at 5. If he got there early enough, before the manager started his shift, the overnight crew let him use the bathroom without buying anything. Donald caught his reflection in the grease-spotted mirror and barely recognized himself. His hair stuck up in chunks, his face shadowed with dirt that never fully washed away no matter how much pink soap he pumped from the dispenser. The gray long-sleeve shirt his mother had bought him, back when she was alive to buy him things, hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight. A lot of it. 8 months. 8 months since the foster placement fell through when Mrs. Chen's daughter got sick and she couldn't take care of extra kids anymore. 8 months since the system shrugged and lost his paperwork somewhere between agencies. 8 months of learning which subway grates stayed warm, which gas stations had single-stall bathrooms, which cops looked the other way, and which ones enjoyed making your night worse. The memory came the way it always did, sudden and unasked for. His mother's laugh. His father's hand on his shoulder. Then the screech of tires, the sound of metal crumpling, the weird silence afterward that somehow seemed louder than the crash itself. Arthur and Susan Brown, dead on Interstate 90 because a semi-driver fell asleep at the wheel. Donald had been at a friend's house. He never got to say goodbye. He'd been going through his father's belongings last week, the single duffel bag the foster system had given him, everything his parents owned reduced to 30 pounds, when he felt something stiff in the lining of his dad's old army jacket. He'd torn the stitching carefully and found it, a plastic card, bank logo embossed on the front, and a 4-digit PIN written on a slip of paper in his mother's handwriting. Hampton and Associates Private Banking. Now, standing outside the building, Donald felt his stomach clench. The glass doors reflected a version of Chicago he'd never be part of: clean, orderly, expensive. Through the windows, he could see marble floors so polished they looked wet. A woman in a cream-colored suit walked past, her heels clicking with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about where she'd sleep. This was insane. The card was probably expired, probably worthless, probably some old account his parents had closed years ago. Walking in there looking like this, layered clothes, worn shoes, the distinct smell of someone who showered in public restrooms, would get him thrown out. Or worse, arrested. But he hadn't eaten in 2 days. His stomach felt like it was digesting itself. Donald pushed through the doors. The receptionist's eyes landed on him immediately, her expression shifting from polite neutrality to something harder. She stood up slightly, as if his presence required defensive posture. "Can I help you?" Her tone said the opposite. Her tone said leave. Donald's voice came out hoarse. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I need to check an account balance." Her eyes traveled down his frame, the holes in his shirt, the jeans held up with a rope belt, the shoes that had been walked through countless Chicago winters. "This is a private institution," she said slowly, the way you'd explain something to a child. "We serve clients by appointment only." Donald pulled the card from his pocket. His hands were shaking. "I have this." She didn't reach for it, didn't even look at it. Instead, her hand moved toward the phone on her desk, and Donald knew exactly what was about to happen. Security. Police. Another night in a cell or worse. Then a voice cut through the lobby, smooth and amused. "Janet, what seems to be the problem?" Alan Hampton stood near the elevator, his suit probably worth more than 3 months of rent. His hair was styled with the kind of precision that required standing appointments. His smile was the smile of someone who'd never been afraid of anything in his entire life. His eyes landed on Donald, and that smile widened into something cruel. Alan Hampton's morning had been perfect. The Vanderbilt retirement portfolio, $8 million in managed assets, signed before his second espresso. A CNBC segment praising his innovative approach to wealth preservation, playing on loop across the lobby screens, his face frozen mid-smile above the cheerin'. Chicago's most exclusive banker. Forbes had called him a financial assassin 3 years ago, and he'd framed the article in his office. At 48, Alan had spent decades building a reputation that made other bankers nervous and made clients feel like they'd joined an exclusive club where the membership fee was simply being wealthy enough to matter. Then he saw the kid, dirty, clearly homeless, standing in his lobby like he'd wandered in from some parallel universe where vagrancy and marble floors occupied the same space. Alan's irritation flared immediately. Janet looked panicked, her hand hovering over the phone. The kid was holding something, a card maybe, but Alan didn't care what story he'd invented. This was disruption. This was chaos entering a space he'd spent 20 years calibrating for a very specific clientele. "Security," Alan called out, his voice carrying across the lobby with practiced authority. "We have a vagrant situation." The other clients looked up, Mrs. Delaney with her Hermes bag, the Rothstein brothers in their matching Patek Philippe's. A younger associate actually pulled out his phone, angling for a video. Perfect. Let them see how Alan Hampton handled problems. He walked toward Donald slowly, deliberately, letting his footsteps echo. Up close, the kid was worse than he'd thought. Clothes that smelled like unwashed bodies and city grime, hair that needed cutting months ago, eyes that held something Alan found personally offensive, defiance. "Did you steal that card, son?" Alan's tone was pleasant, conversational, the way you'd ask someone about the weather. Because theft of financial instruments is a felony in Illinois. That's serious prison time. Someone in the lobby laughed. Then someone else. The sound multiplied, bouncing off the marble and vaulted ceilings, turning Donald into a spectacle. The kid went still. Not scared exactly, something deeper. The kind of stillness that came from expecting cruelty, because cruelty was simply what happened. Alan recognized it dimly, from somewhere far back in his own past, but he buried the recognition immediately. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Alan continued, stepping closer, letting his height and his suit and his authority fill the space between them. "Where did you get that card?" Donald's jaw tightened. His hands were shaking. Alan could see the tremor, but he didn't move. Didn't run. Didn't drop the card. "It's mine." The kid's voice was quiet but clear. "It was my dad's. I just want to check the balance." Alan laughed. Actually laughed. The absurdity of it. This homeless teenager claiming ownership of a Hampton and Associates account card. "Your dad's," Alan repeated, playing to the crowd now. Mrs. Delaney had her hand over her mouth, delighted by the drama. "And what's your father's name?" "Let me guess, Rockefeller? Carnegie?" "Arthur Brown," Donald said. His voice didn't waver. "My father was Arthur Brown." Something flickered in Alan's memory. The name sounded familiar, maybe, but he dismissed it. There were thousands of accounts, thousands of names. This kid was clearly running some kind of con. "Janet," Alan said, not taking his eyes off Donald. "Call CPD. Let's let the police sort out whose card this actually is." "Please," Donald said, and Alan hated how the word sounded. Not begging exactly, but close. "Just check the account. That's all I'm asking." Alan stared at him. At this dirty, Homeless kid who somehow thought he deserved anything from this building, from these people, from Alan's carefully constructed world. Fine, Alan said finally, plucking the card from Donald's hand with 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate him. Let's see what we're dealing with here. He walked to Janet's terminal, the crowd following, everyone eager to see the punchline. Donald trailed behind, smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched. Alan swiped the card, entered the PIN that Donald whispered, waited for the system to load. The screen flickered. Then the number appeared. Alan's smile died on his face. Alan made a show of it. He wanted everyone to see, the Rothstein brothers, Mrs. Delaney, the associates with their phones out, all of them. He wanted them to watch him expose this homeless kid's pathetic con in real time. Let's see what we have here, shall we? His fingers moved across the keyboard with exaggerated slowness, each keystroke a performance. Donald Brown. He drew out the name like it was a punchline waiting to land. The lobby had gone quiet, everyone leaning in. Even the CNBC loop seemed to pause, Alan's own face frozen on the screen above them, confident and untouchable. He hit enter. The system took 3 seconds to load. 3 seconds where Alan's smirk stayed perfectly in place, where he imagined the satisfaction of watching security escort this kid out in handcuffs, where he mentally composed the story he'd tell at the Union League Club later tonight. Then the number appeared. Account balance, $52,347,691.28. Alan's breath caught. His smile, the one he'd been holding for the audience, locked on his face like something paralyzed. He blinked. Looked again. The number didn't change. 52 million. $52,347,691.28. This has to be a system error. His voice came out strangled. He refreshed the screen. The number blinked, reloaded, stayed exactly the same. Around him, the lobby's energy shifted. People were craning their necks, trying to see the screen. The associate with his phone out had stopped recording, his expression confused. Alan's hands were shaking. Actually shaking. He grabbed his cell phone from his pocket, nearly dropped it, managed to dial. Patricia, get down here. Now. He didn't wait for her response. His eyes went to Donald, who stood there looking small and lost and completely unaware of what he'd just done to Alan's entire morning, entire reputation, entire carefully constructed sense of reality. Donald's voice was hesitant. Is there money in it? Alan couldn't speak, couldn't form words. He'd just called this kid a thief, a vagrant, a felon, in front of 20 witnesses. On camera. The elevator dinged. Patricia Chun, his senior account manager, walked out in her efficient navy suit, her expression already irritated at being summoned. She took one look at Alan's face, and her irritation shifted to concern. What's wrong? Alan pointed at the screen, physically incapable of explaining. Patricia leaned over Janet's terminal. Her eyes scanned the account details. Alan watched her face drain of color, watched her mouth open slightly, watched her hand come up to steady herself against the desk. Oh my God, she whispered. Tell me it's an error, Alan said. His voice sounded desperate even to his own ears. Tell me the system glitched. Patricia's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up account history, trust documentation, verification protocols. Each click seemed to take a year. The lobby was completely silent now. Even the CNBC loop seemed to have muted itself. Finally, Patricia straightened. When she looked at Alan, there was something in her expression he'd never seen before. Pity. Mr. Hampton, she said carefully, formally, as if they were strangers. This is a legitimate trust account. Established 14 years ago in the name of Donald Arthur Brown, minor beneficiary. She paused. Funded by Arthur and Susan Brown. Full access granted on the beneficiary's 14th birthday. Alan felt the marble floor tilt beneath his feet. Funded by. He couldn't finish the sentence. The child's parents, Patricia said quietly. Both deceased, according to the documentation. Alan's eyes went to Donald. The dirty kid. The vagrant he'd threatened with prison. The boy he'd humiliated in front of Chicago's wealthiest elite. The boy worth $52 million. Behind Donald, Mrs. Delaney had her hand pressed to her chest, her expression shocked. The Rothstein brothers were whispering urgently to each other. The associate had his phone out again, but this time he wasn't smiling. Alan had just destroyed himself in front of everyone who mattered. The conference room was nothing like the lobby. Soft leather chairs, a table that could seat 12 floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Patricia guided Donald inside while Alan stood frozen by the door, his carefully constructed confidence shattered into something unrecognizable. "Sit," Patricia said gently, pulling out a chair for Donald. Then, without asking, she picked up the phone. "Janet, order lunch from that Italian place on Wacker. Chicken parmesan, pasta, breadsticks, and a Coke. Actually, make it 2 orders. And send it to conference room A immediately." She'd noticed Donald's hollow cheeks, the way his hands trembled, the fact that he'd probably collapse if someone didn't feed him soon. Patricia opened her laptop and pulled up files that Alan had never bothered to check. Account histories, trust documents, legal paperwork stamped and notarized 14 years ago. "Your father," Patricia began, her voice steady and kind, "was Arthur Tari Brown. Army sergeant, decorated for valor. 3 tours in Iraq, 2004, 2006, and 2008. Donald went very still. "Your mother was Susan Brown, emergency room nurse at Cook County Hospital." Patricia turned the laptop so Donald could see a scanned document with both signatures at the bottom. "Together, before your father's final deployment, they established an irrevocable trust in your name." The word irrevocable hung in the air. Permanent. Unbreakable. They funded it with your father's military life insurance policy, your mother's life savings, and carefully managed investments over 14 years. Patricia's finger traced down the account history. Deposits, compound interest, strategic allocations that had turned a modest military insurance payout into something extraordinary. The trust was designed to activate either when you turned 14 or in the event of their deaths, whichever came first. Donald's breathing had gone shallow. 8 months ago, Patricia continued, her voice softening, both your parents died in a car accident on Interstate 90. A drunk driver crossed the median at 2 a.m. Alan watched Donald's face crumple, just slightly, before he forced it back into blankness. The practiced expression of someone who'd learned that showing pain in public was dangerous. "You were placed in emergency foster care," Patricia said, scrolling through child services documentation that had been attached to the trust notifications. "The trust administrator tried to locate you, but..." She paused delicately. "You weren't at the address on file. I ran away." Donald's voice was barely audible. "The family, they weren't. I couldn't stay there." Patricia nodded, asking nothing more. "Your parents thought of everything, Donald. This trust can't be touched by foster services, by creditors, by anyone except you. It's yours. Completely and legally yours." She pulled up another screen. "Until you turn 25, you'll receive a monthly stipend of $20,000, automatically deposited to any account you designate. At 25, you receive full access to the entire principal. $20,000. Every month." Donald's face showed no comprehension. The numbers were too big, too distant from his reality of dumpsters and McDonald's bathrooms. "Your parents knew," Patricia said quietly, and Alan heard her voice crack just slightly. "They knew that military deployments were dangerous. They knew that nursing in Cook County meant exposure to violence and disease. They prepared for the worst, Donald, because they wanted you protected no matter what happened to them." Donald's hands were flat on the conference table, fingers spread like he was trying to hold onto something solid. His shoulders started shaking. "They were ready," he whispered. "They knew they might die, and they were ready to take care of me anyway." Then he broke. 14 years old, $52 million in the bank, and he put his head down on that expensive conference table and sobbed like the child he still was. Patricia's hand hovered over her laptop touchpad. She looked at Donald with something close to reverence. "There's one more thing," she said carefully. "Your parents left a video message. It's standard practice for military families establishing trusts, but..." She paused. "You don't have to watch it now. Or ever, if you don't want to." Donald wiped his face with his sleeve, leaving a streak of dirt across his cheek. "I want to see it." Alan had returned to the conference room at some point. Donald hadn't noticed when. The banker stood against the wall, his earlier arrogance replaced by something hollow and uncertain. Patricia glanced at him, seemed to make a decision, and didn't ask him to leave. She turned the laptop toward Donald and pressed play. The screen filled with 2 faces. Arthur Brown in his army uniform, the fabric crisp and decorated with service ribbons. Susan Brown beside him, her dark hair pulled back, her scrubs visible at the collar. They were sitting close together, hands intertwined. Both smiling, but their eyes were red. "Hey buddy." Arthur's voice was deep, warm, impossibly alive. "If you're watching this, it means we're not there. And I'm so sorry." Donald made a sound, small, broken. Susan leaned forward slightly. We wanted you to know that everything we did, every choice we made, every dollar we saved and invested, all of it was to make sure you'd be okay, no matter what. This money isn't because we're rich, Arthur continued. His thumb rubbed across Susan's knuckles. We're not rich, Donald. We're two regular people who worked hard and got lucky with some investments. This money is because we love you more than anything in this world. Susan's voice cracked. Baby, whatever you're going through right now, whatever happened to us, it wasn't your fault. You need to know that. You were loved completely, unconditionally, from the moment you were born. Arthur straightened slightly, soldier formal. The world's going to try to tell you that money makes you better than other people. It doesn't. Money is just a tool. Character makes you better. Kindness makes you better. How you treat people when you have power, that's what defines you. Help people, Donald, Susan said. Please. Remember where you came from. Remember that we were regular people, a nurse and a soldier, who just wanted our son to have chances we didn't. Arthur's hand came up in a half salute, something between military and affectionate. Stand tall, son. You're a Brown. We don't give up. We don't quit. And we don't forget where we came from. Susan smiled through tears. We love you. Always. The screen went black. Donald's sobs filled the conference room, raw, guttural sounds that seemed too large for his small frame. He doubled over, arms wrapped around himself, and cried the way people cry when they've been holding everything in for too long. Alan stood against the wall with tears running down his face. Not delicate tears, not the kind you could blink away. Actual streams cutting paths through his carefully maintained composure. He didn't wipe them. Didn't move. Just stood there as something fundamental cracked inside his chest. Patricia quietly closed her laptop, gathered her papers, and stepped toward the door. Before she left, she put her hand briefly on Donald's shoulder, a touch that said you're not alone, and then she was gone, closing the door with a soft click, leaving the homeless boy and the heartless banker alone with their grief. Alan's voice came out rough, scraped raw. Donald, I need to say something. What I did to you downstairs was unforgivable. Donald looked up, his face blotchy and wet. The food Patricia had ordered sat untouched on the table between them, chicken parmesan going cold, breadsticks still wrapped in their paper. You thought I was trash, Donald said. Not angry, just stating fact. You all did. I did. Alan moved away from the wall, pulled out a chair, sat down like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. And I was wrong. Not because you have money. I was wrong even if you didn't have a dime. What I did was cruel. Deliberate. I humiliated you because it made me feel powerful. The confession sat between them, ugly and true. Alan dragged a hand across his face, wiping away tears he'd forgotten were there. I want to help you transition. Housing, finding a legal guardian, enrolling you in school, making sure this money actually protects you the way your parents intended. Donald's expression shuddered immediately. Why? Because now I'm worth something to your bank. Partly, yes. Alan didn't flinch from it. Your account is significant. But also because I have a son your age, Michael, and I haven't spoken to him in 2 years. His mother has full custody because I chose work over everything else. He paused, his throat tight. Watching that video, watching your parents love you that completely, I realized I've been a terrible father and a worse human being. Donald stared at him, this powerful banker who suddenly looked small and broken. So fix it, Donald said quietly. Call your son. I will. Alan's voice cracked. But first, where have you been living? Right now, tonight, where were you planning to sleep? Donald hesitated, survival instinct warring with exhaustion. Finally, Roosevelt Road shelter when they have space. Otherwise around. Show me. The shelter was a 20-minute drive from the financial district, but it might as well have been a different planet. Concrete building, fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask unwashed bodies and institutional despair. Donald led Alan through the intake area, families waiting on plastic chairs, a security guard who nodded at Donald like he was a regular, to a corner in the men's section where a worn sleeping bag lay rolled against the wall. This is my spot, Donald said. His entire life fit in a backpack, 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, his father's military jacket, a water bottle, and a paperback book with a cracked spine. Donald, a voice called from across the room. A kid, maybe 16, Latino, with a scar across his eyebrow. He jogged over, then stopped when he saw Alan's suit. Who's this? Miguel, this is... Alan. From the bank. Donald's voice was careful. Miguel's expression hardened instantly. The bank? The one that... Yeah. An older woman appeared, 60-something with gray hair and a bun and eyes that had seen everything twice. Everything okay, baby? Ms. Donna, I'm... Donald's voice got thick again. My parents left me money. A lot of money. I have to leave. Ms. Donna pulled Donald into a hug that looked like it might break him apart all over again. Oh, honey. Your mama and daddy, they were looking out for you. A man approached from the sleeping area, gaunt, weathered, probably 70s, with a Vietnam veteran baseball cap. He looked at Alan with the kind of assessment that came from combat experience. You that banker? Jerome's voice was gravel. The one who laughed at him? Alan met his eyes. Yes, sir. And I'm ashamed of it. Jerome stepped closer. He was shorter than Alan, 30 pounds lighter, but somehow he seemed to take up more space. Donald's good people. Best kid in here. Shares his food, helps the old folks, never complains. He jabbed a finger into Alan's chest. You heard him again, banker or not, money or not, we'll find you. Alan didn't step back. Didn't laugh it off. Understood. Miguel crossed his arms. How do we know this isn't some scam? Rich people lie all the time. You don't, Alan said simply. But I'm giving Donald my personal cell number. If anything goes wrong, anything, he calls you, and you call me, and I fix it. Ms. Donna studied Alan the way nurses study patients. You mean that? I do. She nodded slowly. Then help our boy. He deserves everything good. Donald looked around at his street family, Miguel, Ms. Donna, Jerome, others gathering now, curious and protective. People who'd had nothing and shared it anyway. People who'd kept him alive when the system forgot he existed. I'm not forgetting you, Donald said, his voice fierce. Any of you. I'm coming back. Jerome smiled, showing missing teeth. We know, son. You're not built to forget. Alan watched them, this community held together by desperation and dignity, and felt something shift in his understanding of what wealth actually meant. It wasn't the marble lobby. It was this. 3 days later, Donald woke up in a bed. An actual bed, with sheets that smelled like detergent and pillows that didn't belong to anyone else first. The corporate apartment Alan had arranged overlooked Grant Park, 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen Donald didn't know how to use. He'd spent the first night sitting on the floor because the furniture felt too clean to touch. Thomas Rivera arrived at 9 a.m., exactly when he said he would. Mid-40s, kind eyes, the slight paunch of someone who ate meals sitting down instead of running between crises. He worked for the VA hospital's Family Services Department, had known Arthur and Susan Brown personally. Your dad helped me move once, Thomas said, settling into the apartment's pristine couch like it was normal. Carried a couch up 3 flights of stairs without complaining. Your mom brought tamales to our Christmas party every year. He smiled. They were good people, Donald. I'm honored to help their son. Not your account. Not your trust fund. Their son. Donald felt something loosen in his chest. I'm not here to control you, Thomas continued. I'm here to make sure you have what you need, school enrollment, therapy if you want it, someone to sign permission slips, and show up to parent-teacher conferences. The boring stuff your parents would have done. Okay, Donald whispered. And Donald, the money doesn't change that you're 14 and you've been through hell. We're going to take this slow. Across town, Alan sat in his office with his phone in his hand, staring at a contact he hadn't called in 2 years. Finally, he pressed dial. Alan? Jessica's voice was shocked. Is someone dying? No. He exhaled slowly. But I met someone who made me realize I've been dead inside for years. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? Michael. How is he? Really? Another pause, longer this time. Jessica's voice came back cautious. He's angry. He thinks you don't care about him. He's not wrong, Alan. The words landed like physical blows. I do care. I forgot how to show it. His throat felt tight. Can I see him? Please. I don't know if he'll want to. Ask him anyway. The next morning, Alan called an emergency board meeting. 15 directors in bespoke suits, confused and irritated at the disruption to their schedules. Alan didn't ease into it. I'm announcing a new community investment fund. $50 million over 5 years, directed at affordable housing initiatives, homeless services, and job training programs. The room erupted. That's our dividend reserve. Victor Ashcroft, the oldest board member, looked apoplectic. You can't just... I'm also creating an emergency fund for clients experiencing financial crisis, Alan continued, his voice steady. And we're hiring 10 homeless individuals for entry-level positions with full training and benefits. You're destroying our margins. Another director, Margaret Chin, was on her feet. Our shareholders, our margins, Alan interrupted, are built on not seeing people as human beings, on assuming that poverty means worthlessness. I'm done with that. This bank is done with that. Victor's face was red. You've lost your mind. We'll have you removed. Try it. Alan met his eyes. I'm the majority shareholder. This is happening. The room fell silent. Alan stood. My father was a factory worker. He died when I was 17, and I've spent 30 years pretending I came from somewhere else. Pretending money made me better than the people I left behind. His voice cracked. It didn't. It just made me cruel. He walked out, leaving 15 directors staring after him in stunned silence. The Chicago Tribune ran the story 2 days later, front page. Banking titan Alan Hampton's shocking transformation, from Wall Street ruthlessness to community champion. The article featured a photo of Alan outside the Roosevelt Road shelter, shaking hands with Jerome. His phone rang constantly, reporters, competitors, clients demanding explanations. Alan ignored all of them. He had a meeting with his son. 6 weeks later, Donald walked through the halls of Lincoln Park Academy wearing clothes that fit and carrying a backpack that didn't contain everything he owned. The other students moved around him in clusters, confident, loud, belonging to this place in ways he couldn't imagine. His chest tightened. The hallway felt too narrow, too crowded. Bodies pressed too close. He couldn't see the exits. His breathing went shallow, rapid, the familiar spiral of panic climbing his throat. He made it to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and counted to 60 the way Dr. Moore had taught him. Later, a teacher found the granola bars Donald had hidden in his locker. 12 of them, carefully stacked behind his textbooks. She didn't understand why a kid with a trust fund would steal cafeteria food. Donald couldn't explain that stealing implied you believed the food would still be there tomorrow. That night, he slept on the floor beside his bed. Again, the mattress was too soft, too vulnerable. 8 months of sleeping light had rewired something fundamental. You survived, Donald, Dr. Sharon Moore said during their Thursday session. She was 50-something, with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that didn't flinch from hard truths. You did everything right to stay alive. Now you have to learn to live. Those are different skills. I don't know how, Donald admitted. That's why we're here. The idea came during a session about purpose. Donald sat in Dr. Moore's office, staring at the window, and suddenly he could see it clearly, a foundation. Real resources for kids like Miguel, like the teenagers at Roosevelt Road, who aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. He brought it to Thomas first, then Patricia. They sat in the corporate apartment's kitchen while Donald outlined his vision on notebook paper. Housing programs, education scholarships, mental health services, job training. The Arthur and Susan Brown Foundation for Homeless Youth, Donald said. I want to donate $15 million. Patricia's eyes went wide. Thomas smiled like he'd been waiting for this. Let's build it, Thomas said. Alan heard about the plan from Patricia. He requested a meeting, asked, not demanded. They met at a coffee shop in Lakeview, neutral territory. Alan arrived early, ordered Donald a hot chocolate without being asked. I want to match your donation, Alan said when Donald sat down. $15 million from Hampton and Associates. Donald's expression hardened. Why? PR stunt? Good optics for the reformed banker? No. Alan wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. Because I met with my son yesterday. First time in 2 years. We sat in a park for an hour, and he told me everything I'd done wrong. Every recital I missed, every birthday I forgot, every time I chose work over him. Donald stayed quiet, listening. He won't forgive me yet, Alan continued. His voice was rough. Maybe he never will. But we're talking. And that only happened because you showed me I was wasting my life. He looked up, met Donald's eyes. You saved my relationship with my son. This donation is the least I can do. Donald studied him. This man who'd laughed at him, humiliated him, reduced him to entertainment for bored millionaires. What would you have done, Donald asked slowly, if I really was just some homeless kid with no money? If that account had been empty? Alan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was honest and painful. 6 weeks ago, I would have called the cops. Had you arrested for trespassing. Gone back to my office without thinking about you again. Donald's jaw tightened. Today, Alan continued, I'd have helped you anyway. Found you shelter, connected you with services, made sure you had a meal. He paused. That's the man I'm trying to become. I can't change what I did to you. but I can change who I am going forward. Donald took a sip of his hot chocolate. It was perfect, not too hot, extra whipped cream, the way his mother used to make it. Okay, Donald said finally. Partnership accepted. Alan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 6 weeks. But Alan? Donald's voice was quiet but firm. If this is just about your guilt, I don't want it. This foundation is about my parents. About Miguel and Ms. Donna and Jerome. About every kid sleeping in an alley right now who deserves better. I understand, Alan said. And I promise, this isn't about me. Donald nodded. Then let's get to work. 6 months after their coffee shop conversation, Donald sat in a Chicago City Council chamber, his hands folded on the table in front of him. The room was packed, standing room only, media cameras lining the back wall, reporters with notebooks balanced on their knees. He wore a suit Thomas had helped him pick out, but he'd refused to cut his hair shorter than necessary. Some things you kept as reminders. State your name for the record, the council president said. Donald Arthur Brown. His voice didn't shake. Dr. Moore would be proud. For 20 minutes, Donald testified about sleeping in alleys, washing in gas station bathrooms, the constant calculation of where to find food and safety. He talked about aging out of foster care with no support system, about watching grown men cry themselves to sleep at Roosevelt Road, about kids younger than him trading dignity for survival. My parents saw this coming, Donald said. They knew the system fails children. So they built me a safety net. But thousands of kids don't have that. They deserve better than what I got. They deserve what I have now. The council members listened with the kind of attention that comes from shame. Then Alan Hampton was called to testify. He approached the microphone in his standard suit, expensive but less aggressively so, like he was learning to dress for substance instead of statement. The room shifted, recognizing him. Alan Hampton didn't testify at city council hearings. Alan Hampton didn't acknowledge city government existed. 6 months ago, Alan began, his voice steady but not polished, I publicly humiliated Donald Brown. I judged him based on his appearance and assumed the worst. I called security. I threatened him with arrest. I laughed while wealthy clients filmed him on their phones. He paused. I was everything wrong with American capitalism. Profit over people, wealth over worth, cruelty dressed up as business acumen. Someone in the gallery coughed. Otherwise, silence. Donald Brown taught me that real wealth is measured in how you treat the most vulnerable, Alan continued. His parents, Arthur and Susan Brown, a soldier and a nurse, understood that. They built something permanent out of love and foresight. I didn't understand it. I'd spent 30 years believing money made me better than my own father, better than the factory town I came from, better than anyone who couldn't afford my services. His voice cracked slightly. But I'm learning. And I'm proposing that Chicago's banking industry establish a $50 million fund for homeless youth services, administered independently, with mandatory participation from every financial institution operating in this city. The room erupted, whispers, murmurs, a few scattered gasps. Alan sat down. Donald caught his eye across the room and nodded once. The Arthur and Susan Brown Foundation opened on a cold November morning. 500 beds secured across 3 facilities. Mental health partnership with Rush University Medical Center, providing free trauma therapy. Job training programs developed with local unions, plumbing, electrical, construction trades that paid living wages. Miguel stood beside Donald at the ribbon cutting, clean and fed, and enrolled in community college. Ms. Donna wore a volunteer coordinator badge, already organizing the intake schedules. Jerome stood in the back, his Vietnam veteran cap pulled low, but Donald saw him wipe his eyes when no one was looking. Donald stepped to the microphone. The crowd was smaller than the city council audience, mostly social workers, former homeless individuals, people who understood what this building actually meant. My parents never got to see me grow up, Donald said. His voice carried across the parking lot they'd converted into a community garden. But they made sure I could. They taught me, through their choices, through their sacrifice, that when you survive something, you have a responsibility to help others survive too. He looked at Miguel, at Ms. Donna, at Jerome. You kept me alive when the system forgot I existed. This foundation exists because of you as much as because of my parents. We take care of each other. That's what real wealth looks like. Across town, Alan sat across from Michael at a pizza place in Wicker Park. Not fancy. No reservation required. The kind of place Alan would never have chosen 6 months ago. Michael was 15, tall like his father, but with his mother's gentle eyes. He picked at his crust, not quite looking at Alan. You're different, Dad, Michael said finally. I don't totally trust it yet, but you're different. Alan felt his throat tighten. I'm trying, son. That's all I can promise. I can't fix the past. I was absent. I was selfish. I chose work over you, over your mother, over everything that mattered. Yeah. Michael's voice was flat, honest. You did. But I'm here now. And I'll keep showing up. Even if you need to be angry for a while longer. Even if forgiveness takes years. Alan paused. I love you, Michael. I should have said it more. I should have shown it always. Michael's jaw worked. Then quietly, I love you too. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. The Chicago Tribune ran a retrospective piece 6 months after the foundation's opening. The headline read, The $52 million Smile, How a Homeless Boy and a Heartless Banker Changed Chicago. The article opened with the hook that started it all. A homeless boy walked into the most exclusive bank in Chicago. I just want to check my balance, he whispered. The millionaire banker burst into laughter. But when the screen lit up, his smile froze forever. It detailed Donald's transformation. Homeless to housed, traumatized to healing, surviving to thriving. It chronicled Alan's redemption, ruthless to reformed, isolated to reconnected, wealthy to truly rich. But the real story, the journalist wrote, wasn't about money. It was about two broken people learning to be whole. Two worlds colliding and creating something better. A foundation that had served 1,200 kids in 6 months. A bank that had transformed its culture and discovered profit and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. A father and son having awkward pizza dinners, rebuilding trust slice by slice. The article ended with a quote from Donald, spoken at a recent high school assembly. The screen showed $52 million and everyone's world changed. But that number didn't make me whole. My parents' love did. My street family's protection did. Dr. Moore's patience did. Thomas's guidance did. Even Alan Hampton's transformation did, because it proved people can change when they choose to see clearly. He'd paused, looking at the students watching him. The real balance that day wasn't in my bank account. It was in whether we'd choose cruelty or compassion. Whether we'd let money define worth or humanity define wealth. The screen was just a number. What happened next, that was everything. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you do, kindly subscribe to get more interesting stories like this. See you on the next one.